Welcome to the Lifestyle Evolution Podcast. I am your host, Joshua Laycock. I ran into someone who I knew at the beginning of my career, my corporate career, and I hadn't seen them in a long time. And we had a great chat, but they said to me, I wouldn't have recognized you if I had crossed you on the street, the guy that you were then 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have recognized you. And it was said in a kind way, but it really did get me thinking about transformation and the changes that we make in our lives, the changes that we resist in our lives. And it was just something that I was thinking a little bit about, that as I've summoned up the courage, I guess, to step into who I feel like I am, and to allow truer parts of me to shine through, um, I've been happier. I've been more fulfilled. And I was also reflecting then, if that's true, why has it been so shockingly difficult to embrace a lot of that change, to invite it in and to stay the course when sometimes the forces seem to be screaming at you to say, just go back to where you were, go back to where you were. I've been reading a book called The Shaman's Path to Freedom by Don Jose Ruiz. I think it's the son of Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of the Four Agreements. Sorry, I was just checking to make sure I got it right. And it's a fascinating book, but one of the chapters he talks about is this freedom to change, and it really resonated with me. And he talks a lot about the masks that we wear. And it's interesting, there are so many conflicting views on the masks that we wear in our lives. And some people vilify any mask, right, as being inauthentic. And others embrace the masks. And I don't know, we probably are venturing into semantics with the analogy of the masks. But the truth is, whether we like to or not, I think we all wear different masks. And like everything, I suspect whether it's a good thing or something that is less than helpful really depends on what motivates it, what the intention behind it is, and is it actually moving us to a place where we would like to go? We wear masks, right? As men, we wear, well, the man masculine mask. We wear father, husband, employee. For me, it's one part corporate, one part therapist, one part coach, one part, you know, teacher of jujitsu to tiny little kids who are a little chaotic. Um, Even some of the kids in our class that struggle to sit still, that struggle to listen, who, in many ways the parents bring to jujitsu hoping to kind of, I guess, straighten them out or give them a little sense of purpose. I enjoy and adore working with those kids, and we call them spinners, lovingly. And been called the spinner whisperer. For whatever reason, they gravitate to me, and I love working with these challenging kids, but that's a mask that I wear. And I'm reminded of a time a long time ago probably, well, I should know, 15, 16 years ago, when I started dating my wife. So her and I worked in the same office, a very conservative brokerage on Bay Street. And I was fully consumed in the persona of the Bay Street insurance broker corporate guy. I knew in my mind I wanted to be the CEO of a company. I wanted to outwork everyone. I wanted to accomplish phenomenal things in the world of business. And I took my job very, very seriously. Um, I dressed a certain way. I acted a certain way. I sacrificed things that I felt were out of alignment with my goals. I didn't socialize very much. I didn't go on vacations. I just worked 6, 7 days a week. And I made a very quick progress in that world, as one does, with a singular focus. But it also cost me a lot, right? Didn't have a lot of friends, uh, didn't have downtime, didn't socialize, put on a lot of weight because I wasn't working out. But anyway, as I started to date this woman who is now my wife, I remember hearing people say to her, "Why would you date him? Like, what what is there that, that's appealing?" Which isn't a very nice thing to hear. And she had said to them, "I only wish that you could see Weekend, Joshua, where I sing and laugh and joke." And as we started dating, yeah, I started taking weekends off because there was something else that was more important. But it really got me thinking about the different versions of myself that show up and how potently they were influencing people's perception of me. Um, but also how much of my personal identity and my sense of self-worth was also tied up in the masks or the personas that I were pursuing. Sorry for the clearing of the throat. We have a bit of a cold going through the house. I'll do my best not to make it annoying. So, recognizing that we wear these different persona and acknowledging that I don't want to vilify masks. There was a really great um, documentary about young men struggling. I think it was even called The Masks We Wear or something like that. And it was phenomenal. And it shed light on these defensive, protective masks that these young boys were wearing. Show no weakness, never cry, show no emotion. You know, the dysfunctional stuff that a lot of young people carry. But I think that it risks vilifying the fact that we do wear masks, that we do show up as slightly different people in different scenarios. I think I've certainly been guilty of this, but I know, you know, lawyers who are lawyers and can never turn the lawyer persona off, right? So even when we're at a party, they're lawyering, or it's like the coach or the therapist who can't turn the coach or therapist off. Like if I showed up to a family function and just started providing therapy to everybody, not only would it be annoying, it would be inappropriate. And that would be an indicator that I'm not able to take this therapist mask, this persona, this role that I have to occupy from time to time, that I can't demonstrate a level of discernment and set it down when it's not appropriate. So we do show up in different ways. When I have dinner with my family, I'm a different person. Or I'm not a different person. I show up differently. When it's just my kids, it's a little different. When I'm with my wife and my kids, it's a different. When it's just my wife and I, of course, we're different. Like it's an appropriateness, right? And where I think we run afoul of what this means is in a couple ways. One, when that mask becomes so sticky, so immovable that it consumes us, that we can't turn it off. I think so often of the father who overworks and can never turn the work persona off and is often described as being distant or harsh or disconnected or apathetic at home because our sense of worth, our sense of belonging, our sense of value is so connected to this persona that it roots into us. It it becomes us. For something to become us, I think it necessarily means that there is something separate that exists without the mask. So whenever we are unable or are unwilling to take that mask off, then it becomes dysfunctional, then it becomes unhelpful. And it's not always ego. We have to realize that in many ways, the masks that we wear are based in trauma. They're based in learned behavior. They're based in the kind of early childhood experiences um, that influence our development. You know, if our opinions are never heard as children, then we wear the mask of silence, right? And if we're ridiculed as young men for crying, then we wear that mask of silent stoicism that appears to have everything together, but in fact, underneath, our true self is roiling. Also, when we choose to adopt a single mask as our persona, there is danger there, I think. And again, the example that I think of is of the professional athlete or of the very dedicated athlete. You know, they are the triathlete, they are the CrossFitter. That's their persona. And okay, but when we have a singular focus and all of who we are is tied up in a single goal, a single persona, a single objective, that's okay, provided you are willing and understand that you're going to be giving up just about everything else. It is shockingly difficult, arguably impossible, arguably, to be even remotely balanced or to have nuance in your life if you have this singular drive. And again, you look at the professional athletes, all they do is train for this moment. They train, it influences what they eat, how they sleep, where they train, the time they spend with their families, like everything is committed to a singular purpose. And there is no balance. That's why, like, it's not impossible, but a lot of Olympians I know start their families after their careers have peaked. I know there's a lot of professional athletes that have families, but I think of the particularly this obsession as an Olympian. It is extraordinarily challenging. So, point being, I know a lot of let's call them ordinary people, regular folks like you and I, who are blown away by the fact that their marriage is dissolving or that they are feeling distant from their children, that they don't have friends, that they don't have hobbies, that they've put on weight. And when we probe, and sometimes you don't have to probe deep, tell me about yourself. Usually the first thing that comes out of everyone's mouth is their profession, their vocation, their job. I am a lawyer. I am a doctor. I'm a carpenter. I am a welder. I am a whatever. And when you dig and dig and dig, they over index to that personality. So it's no surprise that if they can't set that persona aside long enough to be present for the other people and the other aspects of their world, they're not in resonance. They're not in harmony with the rest of that world. The other risk, of course, is when a single mask becomes our persona, becomes who we are. What happens if that's taken away from you? What happens when that chapter closes? I think of a lot of soldiers who retire from the military and their entire persona was the soldier, the warrior. And now that they're home, carrying a lot of trauma, they're no longer the warrior. That singular persona has been taken away from them. The professional athlete who suffers a career-ending injury. The average guy who gets laid off from an industry that is struggling and is not hiring. We become untethered because now that mask serves no purpose, yet it has become us. Thereby extension, we feel like we have no purpose and we are untethered. And I think that can be a very, very dangerous place to be. I love watching the kids play before and after class and to see my own kids play and their personas change so rapidly. You know, one moment they're the warrior. The next moment they're playing doctor. The next moment they're explorers outside chasing bugs and birds that venture into our backyard. Then they're construction people. And then they're like, ooh, we just built a thing. Let's be a store. Okay, we're going to sell rocks to dad. And in an afternoon, they can be 10 different people. Watching my kids play, they can be defiantly independent with one another. I don't need your help. Don't help me. Yet if they cut themselves or get scared, they run to mom or dad, and now they're back into their softness, needing protection and help. They will have their very best friend forever, and then following a dispute, they hate them and they want nothing to do with them, only to have 10 minutes later them be best friends again. Change really is a constant for young people. I feel like we lose that and develop a rigidity as we get older. And then that rigidity, that suffering, ironically becomes who we are, which is why, changing careers is so scary. It's why maybe choosing to make a little less money, maybe a lot less money, People who choose and say, this relationship's not working for me. I think maybe we should end it. And they choose to be single. Or people who say, you know what, we've talked about it and we're choosing not to have children. Change and going against what masks were expected to wear by society, or even by the masks that we've willingly adopted to now say, my time wearing that I think is over. It is very, very scary. So, okay, what do we do about all this? I think what we need to do is we need to learn again how to be able to move between masks given the appropriateness of the situation. So, first of all, if you are the accountant who needs to be the accountant in all things, check yourself and have a look at the stickiness of that mask, of that persona. And yeah, sometimes it's about learning the social skills. Sometimes it's having the courage to set that off and let someone else see a different part of you. Because that, I think, is the truth behind a lot of all this. Pun absolutely intended, is that masks can be an extension of who we are in different moments, but they can also shield a lot of who we really are. And it's no surprise that for me, I was able to move more fluidly between the variety of masks and the different roles that I played, and also had the courage to put some down. It's no surprise that it came with some age, a little bit of maturity, maybe, but also the confidence to say, in many ways, to the world, this is what I'm bringing right now. And I'm really okay with that. And if it's not okay with you, then that's all right if we just part ways. There's a lot of things that we carry with us, goals that we have, dreams that we have, feelings and urges that we have that for one reason or the other, we suppress. The path begins with understanding yourself. The path begins with inventorying the masks that you wear proudly, maybe the masks that are sitting on a shelf that you wish that you could bring from time to time, but also looking into the eyes of the person behind the mask and seeing what's really there. As I said, many times we wear masks as protection against traumas and things that have happened to us in the past, and we need to explore those things with a trained guide to walk you through what might be influencing how you're showing up. But also, we need to inventory the parts of ourselves that we're shy, embarrassed, scared to come through. Maybe that's, I want to do something different that my family doesn't expect. Maybe you were raised and the expectation is you were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a business person, and that was it. But in your heart, you want to do art or sing or teach, and acknowledging those things. Maybe there's something inside of you that is longing to be expressed. Maybe it's a political belief that doesn't align with what the world seems to want you to do. Maybe it's a view about yourself, your gender, your sexuality. Maybe it's the food you want to eat, the way you want to parent your children. Like, there are so many things that are part of who we are that we shove down and stuff and take we never even take that part of ourselves out of the box, the mask out of the box. It just sits there and eventually it decays and rots. We have to make sure that the masks that we wear, that the personas that we bring forth are in alignment with our values and our purpose and our core self. What do I mean by that? When we understand our values and our ethics, then we have guideposts. We've talked about this before. There are parts of us that maybe are not socially acceptable. Maybe there are parts of us that we need help navigating, right? Maybe the pain that you feel makes you want to fight everything and everyone. Well, obviously, I think I'm not suggesting that we let that part of us through and beat the hell out of things. But maybe you do find a martial art that gives you some physical outlet, and then you do the work with a therapist to understand where does that rage come from. So the person that shows up has to be in alignment with our values and our ethics. We can't run savagely through the world, destroying things, leaving a wake, all under the false banner of this is who I am, take me or leave me. We still operate in a society and we still have to play by certain rules, particularly when those rules protect others from harm. We have to be mindful of what our purpose is in life. And for the people who have a sense of what their purpose is, they nod and go, yes, of course. And then for people who don't yet know what their purpose is, they get angry and frustrated because it's like, don't tell me to know my purpose. I don't know it. I get it. Discovering our purpose, uncovering it, creating and crafting it. It's a whole different story for a whole different day. But we should be in those moments operating in alignment as best we can with our purpose. Where can we start? If you're a father, then when you're being a father, be a father in that moment. Act in a way that is in alignment with your goals and values and purpose as a parent. As a husband, show up as a husband, not as someone who is distracted, not as someone who is thrown about by distractions and by your anger or your fears. Leave work at work. Be a kind and loving father or husband, pardon me, in the moment. And it has to be true to your belief system. And again, this requires that you have examined and have a sense of understanding of what your belief systems are. But if you're someone who really doesn't like a big corporate environment, you struggle with the capitalist model, and you really just want to give back to human beings, yet you keep your corporate job because it pays the bills and gives you benefits, that mask is going to rot you. But not to vilify that, inversely, like if you like nice things, if you like nice cars, fancy clothes, but you feel like people are going to judge you because you're spending way too much energy on things that are aesthetic, or materialistic, but really in your core, that's where your passion lies, then go after that. Like, to thine own self be true, right? Know who you are. do the work to get there, but only do it if you're prepared to make the change. Because if you do all the work, I mean, and this is not an out. Do the work, but recognize that if you do all the work to understand what you really want, and then you fail to summon up the courage to go after it, it's going to be painful. The analogy is sort of like unplugging from the matrix, right? You can't really go back because you know now. It's actually why I say to a lot of the guys that I work with, particularly in the coaching realm, but it's true in therapy as well, is this the right time for you to do this work? Because it's going to be hard. It's going to be scary. You're going to have to walk through some serious darkness to find the light on the other side. And it is a never-ending journey. I say sometimes in therapy because look, most of the people that approach me in therapy have pretty significant dysfunctions and their lives are not okay. They're not able to carry on in this capacity, in this way for very long. So, like it or not, we're doing the work. But for a lot of people who approach me from the coaching side of things, life is pretty good, but is not as good as they want. But that awakening can be jarring. And in many ways, for the first time, they're taking off all their masks and they're staring right into their bare soul. So we wear masks. Make sure that those masks are in alignment, though, with your values, with your ethics, with your sense of purpose, and with your true self. Of course, there are times where we have to show up, maybe a bit muted. Society requires from time to time that we play a role and play those roles. That's maturity. But know that you can set that aside when the time is right and really run wild when you need to run wild. Recognize also that when we get so connected to a singular mask, that it becomes us, there is going to be a significant amount of fear in taking it off. But resisting that urge to be someone else, to try something new, will only lead to suffering. We have to be prepared to reinvent ourselves from time to time. I struggled to let go of the corporate persona for a long time. That was who I was. It influenced how I dressed, who I hung out with, the amount of money that I made, all of these things. And to then say, I'm going to step back from that and into the realm of therapist and be a fellow traveler to those who are now on their healing journey is difficult for me because so much of who I was wrapped up in this corporate business capitalist guy. And I loved it. And there's parts of me that still do, to be honest. But I was worried what people would think. I was worried what would happen if I failed. What happens if I had to come back to that other role? I was a little worried about what people were going to think of me. Was I quitting? Was I failing over there? So I had to do something else. Like there is, I say there is a lot tied up in taking one mask off and allowing myself to be reinvented, to be burned down in many ways, and to regrow something new and exciting. We are very tied up in what other people will see, what other people will think, and we deny ourselves that ability to change. And when we don't change, we rust, we get tight, we are unable to breathe with life. So recognize that change is going to be very scary in all likelihood. But I think that that means that it is a good thing. And I think that we have placed too much stock in having a singular focus or not allowing ourselves to be redefined, to be a new human from time to time. Yes, constant reinvention from a professional perspective is going to hurt you financially in all likelihood. So you have to be mindful of that. And you have to be mindful of um, the impact of these changes. But again, we need to stop thinking in the extremes. If we choose to take one mask off, if we choose to set one role aside for a while, that doesn't mean that we're never in that role. It just means we can allow other parts of us to come in. That means that you can explore your passions on the weekends, in the evenings. You can work part-time. There's things that we can do that allow us to let other parts in. But again, it goes back to this singular purpose. If I am only one dimensional, monodimensional, there's nothing else there, then we have this all or nothing extreme thinking, which is in and of itself dysfunctional because it's just not how we're wired. And look, if you're listening to this and you're like, no, I am singularly driven to do one thing, and that's it, and don't tell me to take that off. Well, fine. But recognize the costs, recognize what that's going to do to your other prospects, or at least maybe put them on hold, and then go for it. But do it with awareness and recognize that unless you are going to be an alpha level game changer, the people, you know, who have billions, who change the world profoundly, yeah, that singular purpose is needed, but there is a cost. And I think one of the biggest themes that I see with men that come into my world is they want that. They want wealth, fame, significance, you name it. But they also want the family. They want the kids. They want the well-rounded life. They want the weekends. They want the vacations. They want the every little thing that comes with it. We don't do a very good job of measuring the cost of our decisions. And everything has a cost. Everything. There is, I think, a dark side to masks. This is goes back to what I said at the very beginning around there is a movement, like shed all the masks, let your pure self shine through all the time. I think we've addressed why that doesn't really work. It's a nice idea. Masks can sometimes lead to a victim mentality, and I do think that we have, for a variety of reasons. We can talk about this at length as well another day, but there is a significant rise, I think, in this victim mentality. And our masks, sometimes we wear that victim mindset, I think a little too proudly. What comes to mind is sort of like psychological diagnoses. As a psychotherapist in Canada, I'm not permitted to diagnose. It's not a world I'm really interested in. But a lot of people that approach me, both in client in coaching world and in my therapy world, either come in hunting for some form of a diagnosis or come in self-labeled. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a this. And a lot of it's just pop psychology stuff that, tells me that there's something going on and might give me a clue as to what some of the symptoms we might uncover may be. But I often explore, what does that label mean to you? What does having this diagnosis next to your name mean? Why is it a part of that piece that you introduced yourself to me as? Now, I get as a therapist, I understand why are they bringing that to me. But even in the world, sort of the broader world, the non-therapeutic world, a lot of people are introducing themselves as a byproduct of various labels or diagnoses, and it becomes a part of their identity. And I understand that there is an element of eliminating stigma, and I understand that there is an element of being who we are proudly. But I still think that wearing some of these things as masks can be dangerous. And depending on what you do with it, can lead to a victim mentality. And a victim mentality to me is accommodate me without exception. Meet me where I am at all times, all the way. Like, you change to meet where I am. Now, as a therapist, yes, I meet my clients where they are. But part of what I do is reminding people that that's not how the world is going to act. That is not how the world is going to be. And if we have these expectations that because I am X, the world must do Y, even if it is a beautiful utopian sentiment, it is highly unlikely to happen, and it is likely to lead to suffering and to a heightened state of feeling victimized. That is not to suggest that people are not victims. It is not to suggest that really bad things don't happen to people and that we should ignore those things. And sometimes wearing those injustices as a mask, as a part of who we are, is necessary to elicit change. I want to put that out there. I acknowledge that. But I also think that there are, let's be real honest, very few real change makers. And a lot of people who I get just want to be accepted, but are struggling to recognize what that looks like in the reality of the world. And in many ways, and I've seen it, use these things as an excuse for failure rather than as something that they can win despite. So masks can lead to a victim mentality. They can lead to a suffering. And as we've touched on, it is dangerous, I think, to have your sense of self-worth tied to a very specific mask that we wear, particularly because those masks, in many ways, particularly if it's tied to some form of an accomplishment or a job title or a number in the bank account, those things can be taken away from you. And then we become untethered. So I know that I've bounced around a little bit here as I'm chewing on all of the sort of pros and cons and different aspects of showing up in the world in an authentic way. But if I were to sort of sum up what we were talking about, is I think one, we need to become very aware of the masks that we wear. And do we allow ourselves to move around in different situations as appropriate to show up in alignment with our values and our ethics and with our purpose, but also recognizing that we do operate inside of a society that does require an element of little c conformity. There are appropriate times to be silly and goofy, and there are appropriate times to be serious. There are appropriate times to say, be damned with the rules. I'm going to do whatever I want. And there are times where it's appropriate to say, you know what? I have to follow the rules here. There are social settings that require different parts of us to show up. We have to recognize that there is going to be some fear around change because we have forgotten how to embrace change. We have, even though it is a constant. What is it? The only thing that is constant is change, I think, is what is said. And it's true. And the more we can learn to reinvent ourselves, the more we can allow the different parts of us to show up in the appropriate times, the more we will allow our true selves to show up. Ironically, it is through the flexibility of these masks that we can actually discover our true selves. So we have to listen to our hearts. We have to do the work of self-exploration. We have to pick into the shadow work, as Jung says. We have to find those parts of us that maybe we don't love, or more importantly, that we've taught ourselves to hate, but really are things about ourselves that we should embrace, that we can find a community who will be open to who we are and what we're interested in. And then we have to have the courage to act on it. We have to learn to change. We have to learn to play. We have to learn to explore. And we have to, again, I go back to it time and time and time again. We have to have a fully developed vision of what kind of a man do we want to be, and to show up each and every day in alignment with that path, moving ourselves closer to this macro overarching vision of the type of man I want to be, who's true to himself, who is free, who is content, who is loved, who can be loved, who can love in return, who learns to see his wounds through a lens of kindness and compassion, to address any prejudices or hatred or frustration that we feel towards others, to deal with those things and understand what they represent in us and how we're putting that out there in the world through masks. But particularly more practically, if you are someone who is in a career, in a relationship, confining yourself to a particular identity, and it doesn't feel like you, then inventory the resistance to change, inventory the fears that you have, and then work through them so that you can explore those parts of you that are longing to come out. And this doesn't have to be a big grand declaration. I mean, career changes are the easy one that people see and we put them on LinkedIn, but it could be exploration of anything. It could be a religious exploration. I was raised one way, but I'm really curious about something else. It could be sexually. It could be relationally. It could be, you know, I'm a big tough dude, but I've always wanted to learn to knit. And for whatever reason, I've been told that big tough dudes don't knit. That image came to mind. My mom has a knitting class, and she said there's a couple like really big, muscular, tough military guys that are in her knitting club. And I just think that's amazing. But I also wonder, was it difficult for those people to say, I can be a warrior and I'm going to go knit with 70-year-old ladies on a Tuesday night? And I think that's marvelous. So have the courage, my friends, to explore parts of you. Talk to a coach, talk to a therapist, talk to a close friend, talk to your spouse. Because one of the things that I have learned, and I'll leave you there, is when we wear a mask that we know really isn't who we are, it's exhausting. It weighs us down. And I think it kills us slowly. And I think it's no wonder that around sort of 40, 45, 50, that so many of us can't take it anymore. And almost out of a sense of survival, we drastically reinvent ourselves. We break out of this cage that we have created for ourselves. And it can be violent and it can be destructive and it catches people off guard. But if we can learn to explore, if we can learn to make conscious little changes, if we can learn to let parts of us that have been repressed shine through slowly over time, then maybe we don't always need to have this big, drastic change. Or if we do, we've sort of primed ourselves for the reality that change is going to happen. And this isn't some big, scary thing. It's just another change that I'm going through. It's why one of the first things in the men's group that we run here, I challenge people to explain who they are, to define who they are without job titles, without relational statuses. Get to the core of who you are. Begin to understand what you really want in life, really want in life. Identify the things that you are already making a priority versus the things that you kind of wish were a priority. This whole process around understanding the masks, around understanding how we show up in the world, is what we do in coaching and is what we do in the online men's group. The difference being, of course, one is one-on-one, one is in a setting with other men where possibly for the first time you're going to hear that you are not the only one who are feeling the things that you're feeling, and that you can have a bunch of men shoulder to shoulder walk with you as you go on this journey of exploration. And you can try on different masks and see what sticks. So listen to your heart and have the courage to act on it. And I hope that you find the ability and the comfort and the joy that comes with self-exploration, rediscovery, redefinition. Put yourself out there. What's the worst that can happen?